All right, so my name is Dalen. Welcome to this is our inaugural Beer with a Brewer video series. So we're going to go through some of the beers that we've got available for purchase online. We do direct-to-door delivery, and yeah, we just thought we'd get together at a safe distance, try some beers out, and talk about it a little bit. So today we are going to be trying out the Winter Warmer 2 mixed pack. So it's 4 different bombers. And I've got the SKU number here. It's 827073 for anybody that is looking to order it in outside of Grand Prairie. So we've got this one available. It retails for $36 for a 4-pack. So it averages out at about $9 a bottle or 7 cents a milliliter. So we're going to kind of go through each beer, talk about some of the sensory stuff that we're getting out of it, and yeah, and go from there. I'm going to be using the same glass to drink each beer with. So I'm using a Tiku style stemmed glass. But yeah, we'll talk a little bit about glassware and that sort of stuff as well. So we are going to start with the first one out, which is the Seltzer. So we call this one Holiday Seltzer. It's based off of our Helter Seltzer, and it is a cranberry flavored seltzer. So our intention with this one was to produce a fermented hard seltzer. So it's you can call it a beer. It's made with grain and dextrose, and it's fermented. It's not like vodka and water. It's not like a White Claw where it's just 100% dextrose or corn sugar that is fermented out. We do make ours with malts. All of our beers are unfiltered, and so a lot of times you will notice that you get a little bit of sediment, especially in the lighter beers. But yeah, we normally recommend to, if you're going to use the seltzer in a cocktail, we usually recommend serving it in either like a shaker pint or maybe something like a Pilsen glass, so something similar to a champagne flute, so kind of tall and narrow, something that's going to direct the aroma and maintain head retention. But yeah, so like I said, I'm Dalen. We're trying this beer with the brewer thing. Why doesn't everybody, while we're opening their beers, just introduce themselves?
All right. Well, I'm Jeff, one of the Johnston from Grand Prairie, and see what we got here.
Well, my name's Dylan, and COVID's got me stuck at home, and I didn't realize that Grain Bin just this week started at-home delivery. So I don't actually have a beer in front of me, and I get to live vicariously through you guys.
I'm the other Jeff. Oh, am I not? Am I broadcasting here, guys?
Yep.
Okay, there, sorry. So I'm the other Jeff, also in Grand Prairie. And I mean, why wouldn't you partake in a beer tasting and discussion about it when available to?
Yeah, my name's Aaron Penson, longtime fan of Grain Bin, and loving the new delivery service because this came straight to my door this afternoon. So it's pretty convenient and a good way to be able to stay isolated and stay in the house.
And so as we do more of these videos, we'll talk more about like Grain Bin as a company and some of its goals and why we brew some of the things that we do. But for the sake of these reviews, we're going to kind of follow BJCP guidelines. And so we'll let you know where we would kind of categorize each beer according to the BJCP guidelines, and maybe also explain why they don't necessarily fit. So the latest BJCP guidelines, I believe, are 2015, and fermented seltzers are a fairly recent product, and so they don't really fit into any of the categories. So if we were to submit something like this, we would submit it in either like category 31B, which is alternative sugar, or maybe 34C, which is experimental. beer. But yeah, so we're going to go through each beer. We'll talk about the aroma, the appearance, the flavor, and the mouthfeel. But first one up is the Cranberry Seltzer, the Holiday Seltzer.
Now, personally on this one of the biggest things I've noticed between the Cranberry Seltzer and the original hard seltzer is, especially on the nose, it doesn't have the same dry smell to it. I think the cranberry edition, however it's been mixed in, kind of knocks that down a little bit. And from previous times of tasting it, I think it actually represents that in the beer as well. But the nose on it is, like I said, not as dry, not as effervescent, but at the same time, not in a bad way.
It's almost more of a grainy aroma, again, compared to the Helter Seltzer or the base beer. Both this and the Helter Seltzer are 5% alcohol. So the normal Helter Seltzer is a lemon and lime version of fermented water. And so, yeah, maybe it's the way the cranberry plays off the Pilsen malt that we use in this one. But I would agree, it's more of like a full-bodied fruit aroma compared to a drier, more neutral aroma in the other Helter Seltzer.
I think I'd like to see what this does with a turkey dinner. It feels like a good pairing for something like that. I can actually taste the cranberry sauce.
Yeah, I think it would go well with just a lot of different things. It's such a approachable and easy beer. Like I see it with a lot of different meals fitting in.
So when I think cranberries, I think tart. Is it tarter than the base seltzer, or?
I wouldn't say so. Both of them, like, I mean, if you're going to measure it in pH, they both finish at the same pH, which is a touch over 3. So they're both, like, I guess you could say highly acidic, but seeing how it's carbonated water, essentially, it's not quite as tart as you would expect. Like, you do get a little bit of that lemony acidity, but if it was more of a full-bodied, like an Oud Bruin or something like that at the same pH or titratable acidity, I think it would appear more tart than it does.
And that makes sense, especially with the flavor. Again, like you get it on the smell, it reduces it down. And I wouldn't even come close to labeling this as something fruit flavored. It is hinted and it's nuanced in. You can definitely tell that it's cranberry on the flavor and then the palate. But unlike so many of the other things, if I was to go and make a mixed drink with this, it could actually be used and blended in and not just overpower something else, because the base of it would be so cranberry or so tart or so sweet or whatever that looks like. Compared to the regular seltzer, I would actually say this has less bite. The cranberry and the fruit addition to it, again, same as on the nose, brings down that dry bite, brings down almost the carbonation it feels like, even though I know it's not. And it really kind of creates it just as a more sipping drink, which is exactly what you would want in a flavored seltzer, opposed to the base beer the base product that you could potentially mix or potentially dilute others with.
Well, Jeff J., why don't you tell us a little bit about the aroma? What are you getting in aroma?
Well, I honestly think I feel like I smell the cranberry a little bit on there. I don't know. I'm having a tough time picking out a lot out of it, to be honest. It's a pretty smooth drink, though.
And then Dylan, unfortunately, you don't have it in front of you, but what about in terms of appearance, what do you see here?
Here, let me do a clear video potentially for you, or a clearer one, because your camera resolution is down just a little bit, Dalen, by comparison. So hopefully mine's better.
It looks like cloudy water. It looks like it looks like what I get out of my boot when I'm dumping it off. Honestly,
that's kind of what I was thinking when I first poured it and was thinking about it. In the best way possible, I feel like it kind of looks like swamp water. Like it's just that little bit murky, but it just looks like murky water.
Yeah, like it doesn't look gross. It actually looks quite refreshing. It just doesn't look like beer to me, but it also doesn't look like seltzer to me. I honestly don't even really know how to describe it.
Sure, and I mean, so the appearance.
Doesn't taste.
Sorry.
Doesn't taste like a boot. That's for sure.
I'm just trying to get a better view on mine where it's got some light on it. Opposed to muddy boot water, I would personally describe this as like a Chardonnay colored wine that's just a little murkier, a little more opaque compared to what you would actually see in a lot of those scenarios.
Okay, so Jeff, it looks way better when I don't see your face and your forehead through it. You're right. When you hold it up without you behind it, that's exactly what it looks like. It looks like a good white wine.
Let's go with Chardonnay as opposed to boot.
I don't know. Your options are between muddy boot and Chardonnay.
So seltzers, fermented seltzers are going to be especially exploding this year, but even in Alberta, we've started to see the release of White Claws and other fermented seltzers. So there's a few different ways that you can produce them. A lot of them are vodka waters, essentially. So if you were to buy a neutral off the shelf, you would have essentially just vodka cut down with water and then flavored. And then you can also get a fermented seltzer that is dextrose, which would be very similar to what like White Claw does. So they take corn sugar and then ferment that into alcohol. And then that would be why you would get such a clear liquid with that. And so we decided to do ours with Pilsen malt as well as dextrose. The reason a lot of it was for tax reasons. It's still a beer. So our seltzers, we dry hop, we brew with grain, and we use yeast. And so we try to keep it as true to brewing beer as you can. And for tax reasons, it still is considered a beer. But we also think that you get a little bit more head retention. And now mine is essentially gone now. But with the extra proteins floating around from the Pilsen malt, you do get a little bit more head retention, whereas a lot of other dextrose-based seltzers, it's like 7-Up. Like it fizzes a lot and then it dissipates pretty quick. But then you do get a little bit of color because of that, and then also you do get a little bit of haze, seeing how we don't filter ours. But yeah, that is the holiday seltzer, the cranberry seltzer, available in the winter warmer pack. Any last words before we move on?
Nope, I'm done.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good. I like it.
Yeah, it's I like the seltzer to begin with, and I think this was actually a really good addition to it. Like I said before, it makes it that it's a nice sipping drink just all on its own. I enjoy doing that with the normal seltzer, but I know a lot of people have come back and said that's not something they do that with. I think this is a different approach on it, where even those people would enjoy it as just a sipping drink.
100%. All right, so we are going by alcohol content. So the Helter Seltzer was 5%. We're moving on to the Aurora Chai Tea Milk Stout. Again, I'm not getting up, so I'm just going to keep using my Tiku glass. If you were to enjoy a stout on its own, we'd recommend a stout glass. A lot of people, I'm sure, have like an IPA glass. So it's like a narrow glass with like a bit of a tulip on the edge. That would be the kind of glass that we would recommend. So typically people use those glasses just because the angled shelf or the base of the beer plus the narrow mouth, it would be it's an angled base, and then it opens up and then narrows down, so it would increase your head retention, and then a lot of those like chocolate and other flavors and aromas with the narrow mouth are kind of pushed into your face as you're drinking it. But again, I'm just using the Tiku. So fun fact about the chai tea milk stout, it's our winter seasonal beer. It was actually our first commercially brewed beer. So back December 24th, 2015, we brewed our first beer as Grain Bin Brewing Company, and it was the chai tea milk stout. It's we tried to make something that was we wanted something dark and fun, a ton of flavor. We wanted to play around with spices and additions. So it does have lactose, but the lactose is restrained. It does have chai flavors. So like a masala chai blend, you get cardamom, cinnamon, star anise. And again, it is also a little bit more restrained. So a lot of times they're trying to brew beers that are well balanced, and sometimes it's more about how the adjunct blends in with the base beer rather than having a beer with an overwhelming adjunct. But here is the chai tea milk stout.
And right off the hop with the nose on this one, masala chai is like one of my more favorite types of tea, and you can so clearly get that influence from it, the cardamom in particular, and even from the nose you can tell how much of a sweet beer this is, how much of a sweet stout from the lactose smell that kind of mixes in with it, and neither's overpowering on the other, and neither's like offensively strong.
Yeah, I agree that lactose mixes with that chai flavor very, very well in this beer.
Mm-hmm. And I think it makes all the difference, because I mean, spiced beers are normally not my favorite style of beer, but that lactose balances it out so well to make it such an approachable beer that it really does kind of change the category for me. Like,
I totally agree. Sometimes I run away when I hear chai, but this one is one of the better ones.
What's interesting, something I find interesting about this beer is I get it every year, and I have quite a few glasses every year, and it changes year to year. And my wife and I, there's a lot of controversy because she loves the years where that chai really pops, and I love the years like this one where that chai is smoother and it's more complimentary. And so this year I loved it, but my wife didn't quite like it as much.
Mm-hmm. Again, so back to the BJCP guidelines, if we were to submit this into like a tasting panel or an awards show, we would probably put it in 30 A, which is the spiced herb or vegetable beer. So if you were to have like a pumpkin beer at Halloween time, it'd be judged alongside something like this.
Now, I'm just curious, like I'm just looking at the categories as we go through here as well. So would you not have the option of potentially putting this in winter seasonal as well, just because of the over-arc of it, or are there other specifics?
Yeah, excuse me, 100%. And so, I mean, especially with things like BJCP guidelines and the way that we choose to brew a lot of our beers, we I mean, we look to the guidelines as a starting point, but we try not to be as rigid. And so, unless we were saying, we're going to be brewing a Bohemian Pils, and we're going to try and nail the water chemistry, we're going to be using the right malt, the right hops. We typically try to have enough flexibility to say, well, we like this style, and we want to build off of it. And so, especially with using these guidelines, there's going to be a few that it would probably fit into, but I would say that this would be the most appropriate class, just because. Yeah, I think the spice is a feature, and I think it's more appropriate to put it into 30A, whereas a spice beer, whereas it's sorry, was it 34?
30.
30? 30B?
Okay. 38 and 30C would be the winter season.
The winter spice? Okay, yeah. So the 30C, I would actually say one of the ones that we're going to be moving on to, the Belgian Double, might be a more of an appropriate beer for that. But again, it's probably not. So it really is up to whoever's submitting, and then also the judges, to make sure that things are placed appropriately. So if you were to have, say, something like a I'll try to pick something kind of mainstream, like a Granville Island Lions Winter Ale would be a good winter themed beer. Whereas like a Pumpkin Eater would be a good spiced or vegetable beer. And I think that a beer like this fits more into the Pumpkin Eater
spice.
Yeah, like where the spice kind of takes the front of it, and it's a little bit more than just a winter themed beer.
Well, and talking on the spice of it, especially in the flavor for it, you definitely get a lot of the chai, like Dylan was saying, from the previous years, year into year, kind of a little bit of a variance. And sometimes it's the larger factor, sometimes the mellow or the sweetness or the lactose takes it. But particularly with the spice notes, they come through more than just like a generic tea bag of chai. It's definitely that kind of deeper complexity where you get those kitchen spices representing themselves. Cinnamon, very tiny hint of it, but it is there. Cardamom being a big one, but not overpowering. I personally am not a fan of black licorice, and even though there's apparently the star anise in it, I don't pick that up in any amount of an offensive flavor profile at all.
I'm a big fan of black licorice, but I do agree. Like, I don't like, it's subtly in there, but it doesn't really got to search for it.
Yes, this is like I said, it's our winter seasonal. We brew it every winter until it's gone, and it is one of our most asked about beers, and we'll be brewing it again next winter. But yeah, it is available in the winter warmer pack right now, so it is something that you can still get for the time being.
A little more light, and then the one rating I always like on many of my dark beers is how little can you actually see through it. So this one is one of the high ratings. Let's just do a test here as well with hopefully it doesn't blind too much, but yeah, she's nice, thick, and dark. And I'm assuming that most milk stouts or milk dark beers would probably have that kind of a profile, would they not, Dalen?
Again, it depends. I mean, you can you can get a lactose lager now. And so the lactose, I wouldn't say necessarily would add much to the opaqueness of the beer. But one thing that it does do is it balances out that in order to get something so dark, you're gonna have to throw a lot of like chocolate or roasted malt or black patent at it in order to get that really deep dark color. And sometimes you get you get an ashtray if you're not careful. And the lactose is nice because it kind of creates a buffer, so it allows you to get access to a lot of those deeper chocolate and rich notes without it all of a sudden becoming too dry or too astringent or just purely unapproachable because of the amount of dark malts that went into it.
Well, something I love about that beer is I love lactose beers, but usually I can only get through about 3/4 of a pint before I start feeling sick. And I'm not lactose intolerant, so I have no idea why that is. But for whatever reason, that's one that I can actually drink as much as it's the alcohol that gets in my way. Nothing else with that beer if I want to drink lots of it.
Don't let that stop you.
That's one of my if I was only going to be able to have 5 moderately priced beers for the rest of my life, that would definitely be one of them. I love it. I look forward to it every year.
I got to really step up my top 5 list game because 5 moderately priced.
Yeah, what's moderately priced these days, right?
Yeah.
Is there any moderation in beer these days?
It's dropping $50 for a Cantillon. That seems moderate, but yeah. All right.
Find ways to justify it.
Yeah, for brevity's sake, we'll keep moving forward. Next up on the list is our Krampus Kiss. It is a candy cane IPA, 7% alcohol. Thanks. All right, so if I was to pour this into a glass to enjoy, I would use an IPA glass, which would be very similar to a stout glass. So you get the narrow base, and then it kind of tulips and then opens up and narrows. And so you want that kind of narrow opening, not only for head retention, but also to kind of force the aromas towards your face. The difference between a stout glass and an IPA glass is the IPA glasses typically have ridges on the base. So whenever you go to drink it, the beer flows along those ridges and aerates. And so it would help kind of push the aroma up. What's up, Jeff?
Sorry, I just realized I was using the wrong speaker in the Zoom media or Zoom thing, so I don't know if you can hear me clearer and better now.
You still sound great.
Oh, thank you. Quite happy to hear that.
So I may not have had a lot to say about the aroma of the seltzer, but this one is a different story. I love the aroma of this one. Lots of bubble gum, cotton candy. There's flowers in there. That is just a great aroma.
So the story around the Krampus Kiss, this was actually we were wanting to do a mixed 4-pack for winter themed beers. We knew we wanted the chai tea milk stout in it because it's just such a popular beer. I think the cranberry seltzer was probably one of the first ones that we picked, and then our 4th beer that we'll get to was our 3rd idea. And actually, the Krampus Kiss, the candy cane IPA, was started off as a joke. It was more along the lines of, can we, like it'd be funny to make it taste like candy canes, and then we're like, oh, I wonder if we can make it actually taste okay. So we wanted to have that balance between the peppermint and spearmint and the malt and the hops without having something that is overbearing. And so this is one of the beers that I think kind of really shows what we try to do with balance. And so there's a few beers that we do that we try to make a little bit over the top. But this is one that we knew we were going to be putting in. It was only available in the 22-ounce bomber bottles. And we wanted to make sure that every person could finish a 22-ounce bomber without it being like wow, like this is something I wish I had shared because it's a bit much.
Dalen, what kind of hops did you use in this beer? I just love the floral notes on that. That was great.
Yeah, I'm just gonna pull up some notes here. You just keep talking.
I know what you mean about the aroma, Jeff. Like that is, I never put cotton candy to it before, but you're right. Like it does have that that sweetness to it.
Yeah.
So I do know that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I do know that we used for this particular one. We did use a ton of wheat and oats. We didn't want it to be like a New England IPA where it was like overtly sweet. We just thought that would be a bit much. But we did want a lot of that body from the proteins in the wheat malts and the oats. And so, and I mean, you can even see it. Like it is a hazier beer. But
yeah, it's not so bad. I can definitely see through it, but yeah, a little bit of a haze.
Jeff, ask me again about the hop profile.
You would like me to ask you again?
Mm-hmm.
So the hops are very, very enjoyable on this beer. That is hot floral notes. This is going to be edited out, I think, this part. Anyway, yeah, no, I can't say enough good about this beer. I really like it.
Mm-hmm. So what hops are in it then, Dalen?
Well, let me tell you, we went with Centennial and Comet, and I think the one that is kind of throwing people for a loop with that kind of cotton candy sort. It's like a kind of a sweet smell. I think it's the Eldorado. So it's not quite like watermelon-y, but yeah, it is like if cotton candy had flavors, which I mean it has colors, but if it was like a red cotton candy, I think that's what this would be.
What I've also noticed with it is the like particularly on the nose as well. I get kind of like a Pez smell to it, like that powdered sugar, which I mean is exactly what cotton candy is as well. But for some reason, that's what immediately jumps to mind as like a Pez candy.
I definitely get that too, Jeff. I never thought of that, but that's absolutely true.
You do get a little bit more head retention. Again, any beer that has a higher protein count with like more wheat or more oats and stuff like that, you're going to find that the head and the lacing will last a little bit longer. So this particular one, you do notice that the head retention does last a little bit better. One thing that we're pretty happy with is you do get a little bit of that peppermint and spearmint. It's by no means overwhelming, and it's also not astringent. We were really trying to be a little bit more lenient because we didn't want something that was like sucking on a like a peppermint tea bag, like it's just like dry and astringent. So there is a little bit of like cooling spearmint and peppermint in there, like reminiscent of a candy cane. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a bottle that I'm looking forward to finishing.
Yeah, and that's and you were right earlier, and I forget if it was you or who else said it, and it's. You would think like it's not overpowering that candy cane flavor where it's you drink a pint and that feels like too much. Like you are capable of going through a bomber of it without being overwhelmed by that flavor. Like it's subtle enough. It's on the nose enough that you know exactly what it is, but subtle enough where you don't get sick of it before you're done the bomber.
Mm-hmm.
What I have to laugh at is the comparison of this to another mass distribution beer like brewing company that has something to do with ungulates and a head, and so they have the Spearmint IPA, which Dylan, you can attest to having tried that. And what was your terms on it again?
Oh, I don't even remember. I say a lot of things, Jeff.
Well, what I remember from it was that is possibly the worst thing I've ever put in my mouth. So, and that's generally where my thoughts would have went with a candy cane IPA. But like you said, there's no oiliness, there's no resin, there's no esters on the back end, there's nothing like that of the IPA. There's no like huge sweetness from the fruit in the front end. It's a subtle hint of that peppermint and spearmint, and it's blended in very, very well. And all in all, it's enjoyable. Like it is a, I'll call it surprisingly enjoyable beer for where other ones are that I have tasted and what you would kind of expect from the style.
I think my batteries died in my camera. I caught all
I was gonna ask.
that. Just give me a second.
Terrible.
No, I will say this was the one that maybe when the lineup was announced and the packs came out, I was probably maybe least excited about this one. You know, I saw Candy Cane IPA and okay, that seems weird. Like, we'll see. And it's maybe my favorite one in the pack. It just turned out so much better than my expectations of it.
I was about this and the proof were the two that I was actually excited to try, because I wasn't really sure how sweet this beer was going to be. It's nowhere near as sweet as I thought it could have been, but that's for the best, I think. Yeah. The bitterness of the hops really offset any of the kind of sweet characteristics you get from those, whatever you use there. You definitely get the bubble gum and the candy cane type of flavor going on in this beer, but it's just not, it's not overpowering at all. It's well balanced with the hop bitterness.
Happy holidays. All right. Again, we're gonna try and keep it moving. So in case people do watch these, that they don't get bored.
Bored of this?
Beer number 4.
The edge of my seat.
7.5%. Like I said, we're gonna go by alcohol by volume. So beer number 4, we have the Proof, which is a Belgian double-esque beer, and it was intended to be like a rice pudding. Yeah, I'm just going to pour up a little bit here. All right, so one of the things that is kind of fun with beers is coming up with the name. And so this one, we kind of call it You Gotta Try the Pudding. Just because there was, we're coming up with, we're like, man, we want to make a beer that tastes like rice pudding, but what do we call it? And one of the guys, Scott at work, was just like, well, why don't you just use that saying, you got to try the pudding? And everyone was like, well, I mean, yeah, you got to try the pudding, but like, I don't think I've ever heard that saying before. And yeah, after a little bit of research, we did determine that that the saying that we were thinking of was the proof is in the pudding, not you got to try the pudding. But yeah, I think for this particular beer, for what it is, I think the Tiku glass, the glass that we're working on right now, is the perfect glass. Something that is stemmed, so your hand's not going to be warming it up because it's a sippable beer, and it is overtly aggressive with the shape of the glass. So it's going to be forcing all of those aromas and flavors. It's going to be kind of exaggerating a lot of the flavors that you do get. And I think this is one of the type of beers that that could use that. It's kind of a fun beer, and it's weird, and it's worth trying to get everything out of it that you can. So our intention when we brewed this beer was to try to make something that was like rice pudding in a glass. And so we started off with a Belgian double type recipe that we had been working on. We changed a lot of the ingredients out for rice, and then it's a weird mix of styles that does use Belgian yeast, kind of Belgian malt bill, but with that rice. And then we throw in a lot of raisins. We got raisin off of the yeast, but we also did actually add raisins in the tail end of fermentation, and so you do get a lot more of that sweet raisin aroma. It was kind of based off of the BJCP guide 26B, which is the Belgian double. So it's like a strong, multi-complex Trappist beer, malt forward, dried fruit, a little bit of alcohol coming through. Still finishes somewhat dry. So we wanted it dry, but we wanted it full. Not sweet, but like to have like a full flavor palette without it coming across as either like cloyingly sweet or like way too dry. But yeah, here's the proof. You got to try the pudding. Nostrovia.
Try the pudding.
So the one thing I noticed right on the beginning, and this might just be after going through the other beers that we have, but the booziness is a lot more pronounced on the nose of this one. And I personally love that. I absolutely love boozy, dark beers, Belgian beers, everything like that. And you get hints of it in the taste, even though it's only, what are we sitting at here? 7.5. Yeah, 7.5%. It kind of honestly reminisces of like a 9.5, 10% stout to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's got, I'm not going to call it a sweetness on the nose, but the one thing that I do pick up both on the nose and the beginning of the palate is kind of like like the nibs, like the red licorice nibs in particular, not like a sweet Twizzler. And then that kind of fades out and it goes into kind of like more like you were saying, Dalen, with a little bit of a drier like example of the style. You can see hints here and there of the raisins and their influence. And overall, like hands down, no question, this is my favorite of the pack. And like one of my more enjoyed beers from them.
Yeah, and so I remember when we were we did that blind taste testing for the helping Grainbin decide what beers they were going to submit for the Alberta Beer Awards, and so it was blind. We didn't know what any of them were, and Dalen threw a couple curveballs in there, so we couldn't guess what all these beers were. And I remember a lot of people putting stars beside this one and circling it. And I would have never guessed in 100 years that it was the proof. Like I guess I just, when I drank it within the pack, I wasn't paying that much attention to it. But when we were picking it out of a lineup for great beers, I think we all identified this one as a standout. And it surprised all of us when he started showing us what the beers were. Like it was, like I said, it was one I didn't pay that much attention to, and I've come to really enjoy.
Yeah, this beer is a unique one. I think if I was blind tasting this beer, I would probably look into that Belgian double kind of category, because that's kind of what I get right off the hop of it. But it does have such an unusual spice characteristic to it, with the cinnamon and just the weird things that are going on in it. It's a very unusual Belgian double, but I think that's where I would go with the flavor. But you're right, Jeff. I get that booziness too, especially on the end of it. You can definitely feel that heat from the booze, even though 7.5 isn't really huge for a beer.
I love the color of it. probably on the camera it looks pretty pitch black. It's probably hard to tell, but you hold it up to the light, you can just a little bit of transparency through it. You can tell it's a very dark red or brown.
There we go.
There you go. You got the color.
Some
there.
gorgeous highlights. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, that even by comparison, that looks amazing.
Red.
Yeah. Yeah, without the light behind it, it doesn't quite show it off like it deserves. But to sit here and swirl it into the light and look at it, it's got a really unique color too that you wouldn't get out of any other Belgian double probably, or a lot of other styles. Like this one's got a pretty cool hue to it.
And so this would be one of the ones that, going back to the question about like, well, would you put the chai in as a winter themed beer? So if you're to submit it, would it be 30C instead of 30A? This would be one, I definitely wouldn't submit it as a Trappist double, a 26B, but I would probably do a 30C, so a winter themed beer, just because there is a lot going on, but it tastes like Christmas. It's not as definable. It's got cinnamon, it's got raisin, it's got tons of yeast, a lot of body, a lot of booze, but it's more of a cohesive flavor than you get with the chai.
Yeah,
And I would agree with you 100% there, Dalen, that the standard Belgian yeast flavors that you get have been completely overridden by the additions. It's not in any way, shape, or form that that's a bad addition or a bad thing on the beer. But if you were trying to submit it in a Belgian category, it eliminated everything that traditionally would be looked for in there. The one thing I would say, and I mean, feel free to edit this out, is I'm someone who I enjoy when the name of the beer lines up with the flavor, and especially even when we were discussing at the beer award submissions, you would sit me there for 100 tries and I'd never get rice pudding off this. Like I said, I got like red nibs, I get the influence of the raisin, I get a dark beer, I get stuff, but I think there's just that hint of cinnamon if it's present at all, and I don't get a lot of influence from the rice myself.
And I mean, so we did end up using rice when we brewed it. And a lot of times you're going to be using rice in like a cerveza, where you want like a neutral, clean beer. And so we knew that the rice was going to get lost in the flavor. You're not going to get that starchy kind of like carb flavor that you would normally get out of rice. So if you have sticky rice, it's going to be you get a lot of that carb flavor, and then if you have rice pudding, it's the carb flavor plus the lactose, like the cream that you would use to boil when you're making your rice pudding. And that was actually our intention, was to add lactose to this beer. We decided against it because we thought we should maybe add lactose to the Krampus, the candy cane IPA as well, just to add a little bit more body and sugar. And then we thought, you know what, if we're going to have like 3 lactose beers in a mix pack, that kind of, yeah, it takes a lot of customers out. And so people that do have lactose intolerances or issues with lactose, all of a sudden, 3 out of the 4 beers they can't enjoy. Whereas if we just keep the chai as our only lactose beer, so I mean, we weren't really thinking of each beer as an individual, but the 4-pack as a complete unit, and we felt that without the presence of lactose, you don't get that sweetness mixed with mixed with that starch that you would typically get out of rice pudding. But we felt that it was something that we're willing to give up in order to have more approachable or available beers.
Like I said before, out of the 4 in the pack, this is my favorite, and I'm with Dylan on this one. This year is one of my more favorite Aurora chais. I really like the hard seltzer as a standalone, and the candy cane IPA is probably the best one that I've had this year, which is a weird statement to say that there's multiple candy cane IPA beers that I've even had in a single year. But this one, I think, is hands down, bar none, the best tasting beer of the pack. So,
Yeah.
Hey, Dylan, just a question for you.
Yeah.
The rice that you put in the malt, how much of the malt was rice? Like, did you kind of have a blend between normal malt and rice, or is this all rice? I don't know.
Okay, so you're wondering, like with the malt bill in this particular beer, what were we looking for in terms of like how much of it is rice?
Yeah, like, is it like a percentage of the malt? You could say that it was rice rather than a regular malt.
Right. So for this particular one, we use a little bit of caramel 120 to get that kind of color, as well as kind of caramelly deep flavor. So that was about 8%. So it was actually a fair bit of caramel malt in order to get that rich kind of flavor. And then it was close to about 50-50 with rice and Pilsner. So it was 100 pounds of rice to 110 pounds of Pilsner. And so we added a little bit more Pilsner malt just to make sure that we were going to get all of the sugars that we could out of that beer.
Great.
So,
Okay, thanks.
so what's a starch? Like rice is just so starchy. What's that do to the beer?
Yeah, so again, it depends. It depends on the recipe as a whole. So a lot of excuse me, a lot of the sugars that you're going to get out of just using flaked rice are going to be essentially like 100% fermented. So if you were to do like 100% rice beer, you'd get something that was a little bit sweeter than something that was, say, 100% Pilsen, so like a lightly malted barley beer, just because the conversion. So when you're adding the hot water to the rice, the carbohydrates turn into sugars. And the more complex the sugar, the harder it is for the yeast to turn that sugar into alcohol. So if you got a lot of complex carbs, you're going to end up with a sweeter beer. So you do get more complex carbs with rice, but the flavor that you get out of it isn't as noticeable as you would get out of Pilsen malt. So Pilsen malt, you would get more like baked bread or bread crust kind of flavors, whereas rice is almost it's not 100% neutral, but it's close to like dextrose or corn sugar. You get kind of like a neutral flavor out of it, but it's not as fermentable as pure sugar would be. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Well, maybe we'll end it there. Thanks, guys, for joining us, and that was our very first beer review. We got the Winter Warmer 4-pack. Again, the SKU number is 827-073. We have it available for online order, so if anybody is looking to pick it up, we will deliver it directly to your door. It's $36 for the 4-pack of beers, and yeah, it's something that we're very proud of, and we hope that you enjoy. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.